Hello, we made it this far, so congratulations. For those I have not met, I'm Val Imperatore, he, him pronouns. I'm the head of sponsorship for this year's conference. And it is my great pleasure to introduce the next session, the keynote panel between Zahra Bahrololoumi, CEO and Executive Vice President of Salesforce UK and Ireland, and Peter Arvai, CEO of Prezi. The video for this session was pre-recorded earlier this week and will be closed live by Mark Darby, top account executive at Salesforce. I'll let the video speak for itself. I just wanted to quickly introduce the two speakers. Peter Arvai is the CEO of Prezi, which he helped co-founded and led in its first 12 years of existence. He was one of the first openly gay CEOs in Central and Eastern Europe. He's won a lot of awards because of his work and because of the work Prezi has done. Zahra Bahrololoumi is the CEO of Salesforce UK and Ireland, a position she's held since March 2021. So, but without further ado, I think we're ready and enjoy the video.
Okay, all right. Well, hello, everybody. It is my pleasure to join you all here today for such an important and enlightening discussion. This year's theme is intersections, navigating our identities in the workplace and beyond. And I have to tell you, it is very, very close to my heart. As the CEO of Salesforce's UK and I business, equality is a core value at Salesforce. We believe that businesses can and should be powerful platforms for change, for social change, and it is our responsibility to further equality for all. And I think, creating a culture of equality, it isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It empowers all of us to innovate better, build deeper connections with our customers, with our people, and ultimately become, a better company or better businesses overall. And personally, I am incredibly passionate about using my voice and position to help make the world equal for all. I really believe that. And I think, as said by the brilliant Tammy Baldwin, the first openly gay senator in the US in 2013, there just won't be a magic day when we all wake up and it's now okay to express ourselves publicly. What makes the day, we make that day by doing things publicly until it's simply the things the way they are. And I cannot agree with that more. Now, it is my privilege today to speak to Peter Arvai, who co-funded and led Prezi during its first 12 years. In 2015, Peter became the first visible, openly gay CEO in Central and Eastern Europe. Our focus today is on Peter and the success of Prezi, and I hope that I can bring some of my challenges and views in business to help share how equality is a value close to my heart and, again, the right thing to do. Peter himself has been a brilliant advocate for LGBTQ plus rights and progress, and Prezi has over 130 million creators on its platform, and its community has created the world's largest library of publicly available presentations. I can't get my head around that. That is incredible. You think about that as a knowledge base and a knowledge source, that's just another level for me. And I am so excited to introduce Peter to you all today and find out about his inspiring story. Hello, Peter, how are you?
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you, Peter, and thank you so much for doing this with me. I've been so excited about meeting you and talking to you, and I've got so many questions. So I'm going to dive straight in. Is that okay with you?
Same here, but let me thank Salesforce for, as you say, all the great work that you guys are doing.
Oh, it's a ongoing thing for us, and we hope to do much more. So we're honoured to be a part of this. Now, Peter, spotlight on you for a minute. You've done brilliant things, and you've been named Entrepreneur of the Year by the EU Commission. You've met Barack Obama for your work and your tireless work with US schools, and you've been ranked one of the world's most influential LGBTQ plus executives by the Financial Times. You're Swedish, but now spend most of your time in Budapest and the US. And I think, just when I think about you, I always think, wow. And just talk to us about how you bring all of that to shape Prezi into the company that it is today, and you becoming, Central and Eastern Europe's first openly gay CEO?
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around, I imagine. But yeah, it is true. I was born and raised in Sweden, but by two Hungarian parents. So there is a link. And at home, I would learn Hungarian. And then in 2008, I met my two Hungarian co-founders. So I say I moved back, even though it was my parents who had moved originally. And, in 2008, what I saw was an amazingly talented country, and here in Budapest, such creativity. And at the same time, there had only been about 2 decades of market economy. So my experiences that I could bring from Sweden of being an export-led country, I felt very relevant. And I think in our 3-person co-founding team, that was an important value I could bring. And then I ended up spending a lot of time in San Francisco as well, because in our first year with Prezi, we opened up offices there. Obviously, we have most of our competitors and partners there, so it made sense to have an office there as well. And yeah, there you go. That's the mix. And 13 years later, I can say that Prezi has really brought me to most corners of the world. It's been an exciting journey.
It's been quite a journey, and I know inspiring for so many. And I think, I move on to how you've used your voice and your platform for good. You founded a coalition of businesses called We Are Open, focused on Central and Eastern Europe. That brings together more than 1,000 brands like Citibank and Petroleum to work together for diversity. How do you even go about that, and how did you achieve this?
Well, I guess we'd almost have to take a step back, and I'll have to tell you a story of how I guess it wasn't a clear-cut thing that I'd be the first openly gay CEO here in the region. And just to illustrate that, in 2008, when I attended my first Pride here in Budapest, I had come from Stockholm, where Pride was the biggest party of the year of the entire city. Now, contrast that with what it was like in Budapest, where we were about 2,000 people, maybe in a march. We were hermetically sealed off from the counter demonstrators. So in the middle, we would march, and then there would be a set of fences, and then there would be another set of fences, keeping the people out who were throwing eggs and stones and shouting at us. So it was a little bit of a shock, and I wasn't sure really what to expect myself and how to navigate this situation. But fortunately, my co-founders were always very supportive. And then our larger team also was very supportive. And this is why I often say that it was actually my straight friends that made me the first publicly known gay CEO in the region.
That, when you describe that, and I've read that about you as well, that your experience in that first march, that must have been so frightening, bewildering, and yet may have, I would imagine, renewed your sense of mission and purpose, that this is absolutely the most important and right thing to do. I can't even imagine what that would have been like.
Yeah, and it was actually this experience that inspired me to go ahead and want to co-found We Are Open, because year after year, we would go with Prezi and be the only company who showed up at the march with a company logo.
Yeah.
And so being frustrated with that, we managed to convince Google and a Hungarian company called Dispel that we should put up just a simple web page and let companies put up their logos if they are for diversity, and that's how they want to improve the way they're doing business.
Brilliant.
And based on that, just the first year, we got 400 logos on the webpage itself. It didn't mean that all of these companies showed up at Pride, but a lot has happened since those 8 years, really. And just to name one thing, recently, 120 CEOs signed with their signatures in a foldout in Hungarian Forbes, supporting LGBTQ+, Pride and diversity at large. And I know for a fact that these pages were even sent to HQ in London for a couple of companies to inspire others what can be done.
That's amazing. I mean, honestly, you're such a force for change, and I'm amazed at that change, Peter, that you've put into place. It's an incredible outcome, you know, for equality. And clearly, we're not done yet, but what an amazing pace you set, and I really applaud it. And I think, you know, when I think about Salesforce, and you know, we realize the importance of our own voice. And therefore, you know, we're continually championing for equal rights. I'm sat here thinking, I hope our logo was on there somewhere, and if not, we should absolutely get it on there. And I, you know, as an example, I think one of the I remember in my interview, one of my interviews for Salesforce, I was talking to the CFO, Mark Hawkins, and he, you know, I said to him, you know, everyone keeps telling me what a great culture it is, but you have to bring it alive for me with a story. You have to give me some evidence points. I can read, I can see, but you have to tell me as an individual why. And he told me the story of Mark Benioff, you know, our own CEO, and how Salesforce, you know, stepped up against a law in Georgia in the US, which would have reduced, you know, the rights of same-sex marriage in this state. And I was really blown away by how much conviction, you know, Mark and the exec team had here. So it's so important to make the stands that we do. And I think more recently, you know, just standing up for what we feel is right. We lit our Salesforce tower in Germany around Pride Week. You know, we have lots of towers. So to light that up, I think that was just a joy to see. And we of course also partner with, you know, numerous LGBTQ plus organizations across, you know, EMEA, you know, naming a few, Stonewall, you know, My G Work, CSD, and many more. So, you know, all I'm thinking now, Peter, is invite me to the next march, please.
Okay, will do.
But look, let's get back to the questioning. So I think you mentioned Hungary, and obviously you paint a picture for us, but things, you know, are things politically difficult or challenging in Hungary right now? What's the sentiment? What's the mood?
Yeah, it is actually quite challenging. And even though We Are Open has become a clear voice for businesses that appreciate diversity, and even with that strong coalition we have there, we haven't been able to stop some of the worst policies of late. And some of you may have already heard that there are several homophobic laws that has come into place here in the last few years. And in that sense, actually, businesses standing up and being clear about how they intend to treat people equally at work, and also in their just communication of how they see these policies ruining or at least lessening the competitiveness of the country is being heard now. I think that's good. And actually in the midterm, I feel optimistic that people will realize that these policies were a mistake.
So against all of that, everything you've just described, you know, how has that influenced your personal leadership? I think it's safe to say that your interests are broader than just a simple definition of business. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's right. And I think a huge influence on me was my mentor, Kina Belander. So while I was at university studying, I wasn't sure at all what I wanted to do in my life. I didn't feel clear about how to be a business leader and bring all my opinions and values into that work. But she showed me how to do that. At the time, she was a second in command in Modern Times Group, and she was leading business, I think, with a strong integrity of voicing her opinions, her values, and doing great business at the same time. And I thought that was super inspiring, and she became a role model for me, for sure. And in many sense, for me, running a business is really a vehicle to be able to bring values and innovation to the world. And that can't just be narrowly defined to products.
I completely agree, Peter, and that really resonates with me personally. You know, as a leader, my values are closely aligned with, you know, how I lead and the way I lead the businesses. And it's actually a huge compliment when, you know, friends and colleagues can see the same seamless personality and what I uphold. And I'm excited and very privileged to have my platform to be able to be a voice and to lend it to others. I find that incredibly, not only empowering for me, but for others. So I hear you. And I mean, just moving us forward, I think, and on the same vein, you know, is that also the reason why you've been part of founding an NGO on entrepreneurship, and also a founding member around startups? Is that something that runs through you in terms of values?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I mentioned, back in 2008, when we got going, Hungary had little bit more than just 2 decades of market economy. So we wanted to make Prezi and the other companies that we knew were doing some great work an inspiration for how you can do great entrepreneurship that's also conscious and contributes positively to society. So that's one NGO that we built up, and another one was just around the startup ecosystem. It's been one of the fastest way for Hungary to be able to have homegrown companies, because compared to the talent here, there's still too little of that.
And what advice would you have, you know, for founders who want to be LGBTQ inclusive, whether they identify with the community or their allies, but, you know, if they're stretched for budget and time and staff, what words of wisdom would you pass on to them, those founders?
Well, first of all, it really starts with you. You have to find a way of being able to bring your whole self to work. Otherwise, how could you possibly expect others to do it? And so I think that's the key. And then it's really like circles rippling out from there. You know, for us, we are a 300 plus team. Obviously, I could be interviewing everyone if I would have wanted to, but the better way of doing that, I think, is just to ensure that your core team is a great team, because these people will then attract the right people going forward. And so I'm not a big believer in writing down your values too much on paper. Always, it's good to have a record of it. But at the end of the day, the values you have in your company is just the sum of the values of the people who are in it. And so attracting the right people, setting the culture from step number 1, I think, is the key.
I love that answer. It always starts and ends with people. I think you're absolutely right there, and I think people will appreciate that insight from you, Peter. You know, I would also build on that and say it's how you live them every day. It's one thing to write them, it's how do you live them. And I like to say that certainly within Salesforce, the values run deep. You know, people do live them every day. And you know, we've had a big week this week. I don't know if you're aware, but you know, we announced a few days ago about our gender inclusive benefits. You know, these include providing, you know, transgender employees financial and emotional support on their journeys to get to their authentic selves as they need. And this includes, you know, medical reimbursement, gender affirmation leave, and even a new wardrobe allowance. You know, it can be an expensive transition. And I hope more employers step forward and you know, create more policies that support our trans employees, friends and colleagues. Peter, you know, is there anything else you want to share? Any other wisdom before I wrap us up and bring us to a close? Anything else you want to share?
Well, I think, you know, we're at a tricky time. We live in a polarized world, and at the same time, I think there is such an opportunity to bring a diversity of leadership that can show what it's like to collaborate and produce amazing things that could have never been imagined without the colorfulness of the diversity that we have. So I believe we need the people in the audience to come and lead. And I hope that our conversation could at least provide some examples about how that's possible.
Thank you, Peter, you know, for sharing your wonderful story with us all today and your words of wisdom. I think, you know, business leaders, we all sense that we have a responsibility to work with public, private, and civil society stakeholders to make our world better, more equitable, a more equitable place to live and work in. And you know, Salesforce and I stand ready to collaborate for the greater good. You know, I've seen firsthand what you describe, you know, how active diversity and inclusion commitment makes for better products, you know, makes for more productive and strongly skilled teams and happier customers. And I think, you know, integrating, as you heard Peter describe, you know, your integrated self, your authentic self, bringing diversity and inclusion into the DNA and the values of companies, you know, not only the right thing to do, but key to business success. And we know that it's no longer enough just to serve stakeholders. You know, we need to serve everybody in society. And so thank you for inviting me to present this session. I'm truly honoured to be part of these discussions. Thank you, Peter, for your amazing stories and success. I shall watch this space. I am expecting an invite, I promise you, an invite to Pride. Please, please, I want to march with you. And now I think I will hand over to the wonderful Mark Darby, who works with me in my CEO office as my client engagement leader. You know, today he will share his own journey. And I'm so proud that you are here with me today, Mark, to represent these issues and share your story. So Mark, over to you.
Hi everyone, is this working? Can you hear me okay? Okay, amazing, good stuff. So firstly, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be here, but I have to say, this is the first time since the pandemic that I've given a public speech. So I feel like I've just got my social skills back, so you may have to bear with me on this one. But as Zahra just mentioned, I work with her in our CEO office, but I also partnered with her really closely on diversity and inclusion. It's a topic that's really close to both of our hearts. So I hope you really enjoyed the session. And I think the conversation between Peter and Zahra really resonated with me because I think it's not only super inspirational, but it also really goes back to, you know, how far we've come as a society. So what really struck me was when Peter said the challenges he faced at Budapest Pride only 13 years ago. 13 years ago is our generation, and we all know too well the challenges that we still face today. So when Zahra said to me, who attends EUROUT? I said, it's basically the most inspiring, incredible people that come together who are going to go on to lead business and the world. And I fundamentally believe that. This is a room full of incredibly talented people, and I'm so excited to be part of this conference for another year. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you all about today, I really pushed myself to take a step back and think what would have been good for me to hear when I was younger. And I think the things that stuck out to me the most were, you know, I lacked quite a lot of confidence and authenticity when I was growing up. And I really do think that those two things go hand in hand. And unfortunately, I think that's a common story for many people growing up LGBT, mainly because of the challenges we face when we are growing up in society. So as you can probably tell, I'm originally from Australia. I grew up just outside of Sydney in a very non-diverse area. So not only were there no visible LGBTQ people, role models, but everyone at my school was white. So incredibly non-diverse. But the blessing for me is that my parents knew this, and they were very intentional about taking myself and my sisters to really diverse areas, great diverse restaurants to really start to broaden our minds. So at about 5 years old, I remember my favorite place to go was a Lebanese restaurant called Abdul's, and I absolutely loved it. And the people there barely spoke any English, but we just grew such a deep connection. And every time I went there, they were like our extended family. And I think that was the moment when I realized that there's much more to the world, and I really want to experience that in a deeper way. So fast forward many years, and I was lucky enough to do my final year of high school in Japan. And then I returned to Australia, completed university, and I realized that I really wanted to move abroad again. So with my passion for travel, big cities, and diverse people, I knew that London was the place for me. So 14 and a half years ago, I arrived here with the absolute intention of staying for 2 years. So I was quite wrong on that one. But when I arrived in London, I was still on my journey. I was still in the closet, and I didn't really know who I was. But really arriving here was such a liberating experience for me to really come to terms with who I was, but also be accepted for who that person was as well. And I feel that many people here have a similar story to that, or actually it could be very different, but I think the key thing is that we all have a story. And I think these stories really enable us to connect even further. So after coming out, I was starting to feel very authentic and being able to be myself, but that was only really in my personal life. So what I realized very quickly is that I was still being the old Mark at work. So I was very much in the closet. And I did that for most of my 6 years when I arrived in London. And the reason for that is because the companies I was working for, as great as they were, the equality was not top of the agenda. And it wasn't really top of the agenda for many companies 10 years ago. So what happened is that I was living sort of my best life on the weekends and after work. But then when I would go to work, I would return to my old self. And it was actually really horrible. So I knew that I needed to do something about that. But I kept my head down, focused on doing well in my job. But it became really draining, similar to the point in my personal life where I had to come out to my family. I didn't want to have two stories between my personal life and work. And I remember having this conversation with my sister, and I said to her, you know what, I'm just not really feeling motivated anymore at work, which was quite a bizarre experience for me because I'm quite ambitious as a person, and I knew something had to change. But I'm a huge believer in divine intervention. So just after this moment, my boss at the time organized a team night out. So he got together about 16 of us, mainly white straight men, and we went to a pub and we did a pub quiz. So during that quiz, the topic of pop culture came up. You're probably not surprised, but I basically knew every single question, answered it, and my team did very well. But then my boss looked over at me, my drunk boss, looked over the table, leant in and said, Mark, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And anyone who gets that, it's like literally the worst thing to hear. I'm like, it's always going to be something absolutely horrendous. So he said to me, are you like gay or bisexual or something? And in that moment, I froze. And I'm like, first of all, I can't believe he just said that. And when you go through a traumatic experience, I think the whole world slows down. So within this kind of 2-second period, 1,000 things went through my mind. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Do I, just say no and laugh it off like I always used to do? Or should I be brave and stand up to my truth? And it just like came across. I said, yes, I'm gay. And it was the most bizarre out-of-body experience because I can't believe I said that. But I looked so confident, and I took a sip of my vodka soda and I was the boss. But I tell you what, I was absolutely freaked out. Everyone looked so awkward at the table. But you know what, on reflection, it was a terrible thing that happened to me. But it also was a catalyst for me to realize that, I needed to be somewhere where I could be myself. So that really drove me to go on a journey of really researching what kind of companies do I want to work for. And that was a long journey. It was over a year to think, where do I want to be heading towards? And I found it really challenging to do that. So I actually quit my job. And I had no job to go to. So I had the intention of taking 1 month off, but I'm terrible with timings, as you know, from moving here, 2 years going on 15. And I ended up being off work for 6 months. And I now call that a career break. Because I was intentional with the companies I was interviewing for. So I only interviewed at about 3 or 4 companies during that time. And that was so intentional because I knew I needed to go somewhere where I could really be myself. And that's how I came to Salesforce. So I've been at Salesforce for 7 years ago, and I joined for their values. And the conversation that Mark was driving at the time was all about, business is the greatest platform for change. And I knew that they had a greater sort of objective to drive societal influence, which really resonated with me. And within the first year, I was really lucky to see all of that come to fruition and see the company live out those values. So some of you may remember the Religious Freedom Act, which was trying to be implemented in the state of Indiana by Mike Pence. So the law would essentially allow businesses to discriminate directly against the LGBTQ community. So Salesforce had a major hub in Indiana, and our CEO, Mark, was so disturbed by this that he said, we are going to do everything we can to stop it. So we sent the best legal advisors and government affairs team into Indiana. And we basically said to them that if you do this, it will impact our employees, our customers, and we'll pull all of our programs, we'll pull our events, and even staff travel into the state of Indiana. Nothing happened, so he upped the ante, and he then offered all employees a relocation package to move out of Indiana. And then still didn't work. So the final assault was that he actually threatened the state that he would withdraw our entire business from Indiana, which would be a multi-billion-dollar blow to them. He also then rallied corporate America, Tim Cook included, and they joined the conversation. And I'm happy to say that after 1 week-long backlash, Mike Pence did agree to revising it, and he banned the explicit refusal of service to LGBTQ people. So it was an amazing time. And for me, being part of Outforce, our LGBT group then, was such a great experience because we were helping drive that conversation and advising the business on what they actually needed to do. And at that moment, we not only changed the country, but we changed the world. And that's a moment where we shifted from an employee social network to a critical business resource where we were consulting on global issues. And that's really the moment for me where I realized that business really fundamentally can be the greatest platform for change. So at that time, I was involved at a global level, but we didn't actually have employee resource groups in EMEA. So I decided to sort of kickstart off this process. So I didn't know what I was doing. I approached it like building a business and got some really passionate people to help me. And we started, and I got an executive sponsor, but it was so daunting for me because I realized that I'm going to have to start talking about being gay at work, being authentic. And I knew that was going to be a very different experience to everything I've ever had. So our executive sponsor at the time, he was amazing. He was an ally. He didn't have a huge amount of knowledge about LGBTQ in general. So my first meeting with him, it was such an amazing session. He's like, I know nothing, please teach me. So I was literally on a whiteboard writing out L for lesbian, G for gay. And he's like, oh, okay, is that what it means? Okay, are there many bisexual people here? I'm like, just give me a second. I need to like get used to this whole conversation. But it was such a great thing because it really pushed me to start talking and driving this conversation, which grew my confidence fundamentally. And in that year, we really focused a lot on driving events and great programming. But the biggest impact I really feel like we had was through our employees. So over the years when I was running it, I had several, numerous employees come out to me. I had parents come to me and say, my child is coming out, what do I do? I've even had parents saying that their children are transitioning. How can Salesforce help? How can we help? What do I need to do? So knowing that we've been there through their time of need has made it all worth it. But leading Outforce has really enabled me to become my authentic self and also discover my greater purpose. So during the 4 years I led the group, I'm happy to say that we expanded to 12 hubs in Europe, over 1,000 members. We raised over £100,000 for LGBT homelessness. And we now have over 4,000 members in 27 countries. So huge impact. And it was also the catalyst for other affinity groups to come to EMEA. But really beyond the numbers, it really enabled me to meet so many incredible people from different backgrounds in and outside of Salesforce, and also made me known to our executive leadership, which is why I think I'm where I am today. So my guidance to all of you, if you're starting out in your careers or even new to it, is to find companies where you can truly be you. You're worth it, you deserve it, and you don't have to hide. Find your passion, embrace others, give back, and you will be successful. And like my personal story, I think authenticity is really a personal journey. So, and for some people will feel much more comfortable with being authentic than others. But the core message I'd like to convey to you all is that no matter what you decide, it will be okay, and there's a place for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing your experiences. For those of you who don't know, Mark is also on our board of directors as well and has been volunteering tirelessly over the past few months, helping us prepare for the conference, as well as setting up the EUROUT BCG, or sorry, EUROUT Salesforce partnership. So thank you, Mark.